Okay, so we should be recording now. Let's start class. All right, so APUSH Period 3 review should pop up there. This is our review, and as you notice, this goes from 1754 to 1800. All right, so 1754 to 1800 really is all about George Washington and how he basically created a country by stealing it from another country who stole it from a whole bunch of different people. All right, so we need to really understand George Washington's true legacy, but it goes over much more than just that. Over here on the left is a book title, You Never Forget Your First, a biography of George Washington. This is the newest biography of George Washington by historian Alexis Coe. You can follow her on Twitter, and it really dives into kind of some of the myths of George Washington, trying to get to a good understanding of who he was. All right, so let's move on. When we think about period 3, it goes from 1754 to 1800. So that's the French and Indian War, also known as the 7 Years' War, if you're still stuck in WAP. And then it moves through the road to revolution. Then you hit the American Revolution. Then the critical period, for those of you who are like, I've never heard of the critical period, that's the Articles of Confederation. And then it moves into the Constitution and finally the Federalist with George Washington and John Adams' presidency. The start date 1754 is the beginning of the French and Indian War. All right, and 1800 is the election of 1800 in which Thomas Jefferson wins. All right, now a big theme that runs throughout this entire period is about the unification of those 13 colonies. All right. Will the colonies actually unite into one and actually fight with each other, or will they continue to have their kind of very separate identities and regional identities? And so here you have this cartoon, and I put it up here because College Board loves to give you this cartoon. All right, it was drawn by Benjamin Franklin, and Benjamin Franklin drew this whenever he was actually pushing for what was known as the Albany Plan for Union. All right, the colonies met in Albany, New York, right before the French and Indian War started, to kind of defend themselves against a growing native resistance in the West, and to try to ally with some of the Iroquois nations in the East. And he argued that there needed to be a colonial government, and that the different colonies needed to join together, or they risk extermination. And the British rejected it, and so did the colonies. The colonies thought it didn't go far enough. The British thought it was way too much power and way too much autonomy, right? But from there, from 1754, you see this tension between the two sides about whether or not the colonies are actually autonomous, have actual control or not. And we all know that that goes back to a system that had been put in place since the 1680s, known as salutary neglect, in which the British had basically let the American colonies do what they want, as long as they were making money, and the American colonies had developed within that system a certain level of autonomy that they did not want to give up. All right, so yeah. So we'll go to the French and Indian War. I'm not going to go through every single thing. Just understand that when you talk about the French and Indian War, it's a vital, key turning point in American history because of a couple of things. All right, the French are eliminated as an imperial rival in North America. Okay, with the Treaty of Paris, 1763, with the British winning, you see that all of a sudden North America becomes all British. As far as the eastern portion of North America. And then, of course, you see one of the main reasons why the Americans wanted independence, and that is that desire for land. The whole war started because George Washington and the different speculators from Virginia and other colonies wanted claims to the Ohio River Valley that the French also claimed. And that's what began the conflict. All right. And so when we think about it that way, in this kind of colonial settler, progression westward from the East Coast westward, right? It makes sense why after the proclamation of 1763, when the British basically told the American colonists that they cannot cross the Appalachian Mountains and go west, that you're going to see this growing tension between the two because you're stopping that settler colonialism. Now, there's a lot of different reasons for the proclamation of 1763. All right, it was Pontiac's rebellion. It was a response to Pontiac's rebellion. It was also it was also a way for the crown to take control of that land so that they could benefit off the sale of it. So in both those ways, you can see both sides are working towards their own benefit and towards their own material wealth gain. And that's going to create tension as we move into the 1760s and 1770s. All right. So we're going to stop here. It should pop up with the text box. All right. I want you to give me one sentence. All right. To provide an example from 1763 to 1776 and how it led to the U.S. independence. So let's read this. All right. This is from the Declaration of Independence for those of you who do not know. All right. The history of the present King of Great Britain is a history of repeated injuries and usurpation, all having in direct object the establishment of an absolute tyranny over the states. So give me one example of what the colonists would consider a repeated injury or usurpation, and how did it lead to U.S. independence? While you're doing that, I'll be able to see your responses. No one else can see them unless I share them, but we've got another minute. It looks like a lot of you have some really good ones. Some of you haven't responded yet. Please make sure. Maybe we know we're all on the same one, same page here.
Do we just like type in our responses? Is there any submission, or do we just leave it?
I can see it, so as soon as you type it in, it pops up over here for me. So looks like we have a lot of good ones. You know, when we talk about this one, the Declaration of Independence being that kind of breakup letter in which Thomas Jefferson is listing out all the reasons why the Americans are separating themselves. Like we're breaking up with you because you did this and this and this and this. Hey, Aiden, I'm doing fine. How you doing? Sorry, he wrote me a question on there. All right, so, but yeah, the idea of taxation without representation, we'll talk about that. Stamp and Sugar Acts, we're going to look at those too. All right. Someone put the Homestead Act. Please be wary. The Homestead Act will come in the 1860s. All right. Let's see here. I saw the Proclamation of 1763, which we just talked about. Townsend Acts are a good one. All right. So it looks like you got, be very careful of just putting something like taxes. All right. Taxes are going to be very vague. All right. Anytime you're dealing with a question like this, you want to go ahead and give a specific. So one example of a usurpation or repeated injury from the King of Great Britain would be the repeated taxes like the Stamp Act and the Sugar Act, which the colonists felt were violating their rights as Englishmen. And that's a big one, right? Their rights as Englishmen. When we talk about why the American colonists decided to leave, we have to really understand, like, what did they understand about themselves in terms of being a part of the British Empire. And for a lot of them, they've been reading since the 17th century these old Whig ideas, these old Republican ideas from the English Civil War in the 1680s. And for them, a lot of them started seeing themselves like, listen, we are British citizens, which means that we should have the right to determine the taxes that we pay and when we pay them and who we pay them to. And that should come from our local governments, not the national government. And you can almost see that theme running through all of American history, even up to today. When you think about it, like when we talk about taxation, I think everybody knows that taxes have to be paid in order for a government to run. But who do you pay the taxes to? Do you pay the taxes to Washington, D.C., or do you pay the taxes to Austin, Texas, and Carrollton, Texas? All right, and that idea of local versus national control over taxation. And so you do have that rallying cry of no taxation without representation. But we talked about this in class, that really wasn't an actual a fighting point for most of the leaders of the revolution, simply because there was some representation. It wasn't a voting representation, but there was some representation for the colonists. And even if the colonists had gotten representation, like full representation, they wouldn't have had enough of a voting bloc to stop any taxes. All right, so let's put a stop right here. Let's talk about why the taxes were put out there. It doesn't matter how many times that I tell you this. It is not because the British wanted the colonists to pay off the debt. Like none of these taxes, the Sugar Act, the Stamp Act, the Townshend Acts, are going to pay off the massive debt from the French and Indian War. The taxes were to offset the cost of defending the new empire. Okay? So taxes do two things here. Taxes offset any cost for sending over redcoats or the British military into North America. And the taxes also act as kind of a symbolic measure of we have control over you and you are going to help defend this empire. And so those are the two things that really that we really need to focus on. So when you write, my guess is that the one DBQ question that they're going to give you has to come from period 3 through 7. And I really don't think they're going to go to period 7. I think it's too close to the pandemic that they're not going to want to mess with that. So I'm thinking period 3, 4, 5, or 6 are going to be your best bets. And they've done a period 3 one, so maybe you're in luck and there won't be a period 3. But be aware that that's a fairly common one that they know a lot of people have studied. All right, and so they may want to go with something that's a little bit more accessible. I don't know. We'll see. But if you get to write about this, make sure that you're writing in a way that shows complexity, that it really is not about paying off $1 trillion worth of debt. They wouldn't be able to do it that way. Okay? So big ideas in this one, of course, will be how do you get from 1763, we're all happy to be in the empire, or 1763, we're all happy to be in the empire, to 1776, forget you, we're out of here. Okay? Well, a big part of it is the feeling of betrayal, this idea that you are not being treated like a British citizen. And that comes from these like middle points right here, the taxation issues and the representation issues, right? And that people have a much harder time with direct taxes, things like the Stamp Act or the Townshend Acts, than they do with the indirect taxes. And if you don't remember what that was, an indirect tax is like a tariff or a duty on something that you're bringing into the country. A direct tax is more like a sales tax. So, I notice and understand a sales tax much better than I know the issues behind the tariff. So, when we're talking about the people and why the people are upset, the direct taxation of the Stamp Act or the Townshend Acts would be a much bigger motivator for them. And then, of course, if you're one of the leaders of the colonies, this issue of representation. Do you have say in how the government is placing these taxes on you? And people like Sam Adams and John Hancock will start up organizations like the Sons of Liberty. John Dickinson will write a series of letters called the Letters from a Pennsylvania Farming, series of essays, in which he argues that the Townshend Acts and others have completely violated this idea of British citizenship, and that what the British are trying to do is to make the American colonists subservient. And as we've been talking about, they've been reading these John Locke essays, the Second Treatise on Government. They've been reading these pamphlets from the English Whigs from the 1660s and 1670s. And they are going to find a lot of encouragement saying, listen, maybe the king shouldn't have this much power. The king and the parliament shouldn't have this much power over us. Okay? And so that will lead them to start resisting, as you would say, the British. All right. For the next slide, you should have a drawer. You should be able to draw something. Okay. It should have switched on us. Yes, there it goes. All right. I want your best, George Washington. Do your best. Make it hilarious if you can. All right. Because George Washington becomes a central figure. He helped start this French and Indian War, and then he becomes one of the leaders of the American Revolution, and then, of course, he'll become the first president. So we have to kind of understand him. Now,
I draw George Washington on my DBQ, I'll get a 5.
I think so. I think that would be awesome. Um,
This looks terrifying.
yes, I'm watching it. Aiden's looks like an octopus, but only with 4 legs. Let's see here.
What does mine look like to you, Mr. Zuber?
I'm getting there. Ooh, someone has taken some time here. They've got like the outline. We got the symmetrical lines, making sure that works.
It kicked me out. No.
Ava, that's a beautiful one with the smiley face and the red hat. Oof.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, here, let me finish it up. Let me give him a beautiful, beautiful coat.
Not bad. Brooklyn put him on the $1 bill. All right.
Okay, he has sword. And
I love it because all of these will save, and I'll be able to send them to you. So always have.
we can write text. Okay, here, give me a couple seconds.
Look at that, Eric. I like it. He has a dollar bill in his hand, so he's already promoting himself. Gracie.
Okay, that's good.
Gracie. I don't know what this is. Haley apologized. Oh no, I think it's pretty good. His nose is a little bit big, but that's okay. Oh, Hema deleted her response. That did. Jocelyn, I like all the color. There's some red and some green and some gold and some black there. Okay. Jared, I'm not sure exactly what you were drawing there, but it looks awesome.
Okay, Zuber, how's mine?
Jasmine gave me a George Washington with a cape. I like it. Oh, you're drawing the. I was hoping it was like a superhero cape. Caitlin's looks nice. Okay. Ooh, the bad teeth. Thank you, Kasha, for the bad teeth. All right. Yeah, he's kind of a bastard, right? Because he pulled the teeth out of his enslaved workers in order to give himself dentures. All right, Leah Varghese gave me a thumbs up. That's good. All right.
He really pulled out people's teeth? That's nasty.
Yeah, that's like the myth that he had wooden teeth is of course a myth. He did have dentures, and the dentures were made out of the teeth of his enslaved workers that he pulled out. Nick, does yours have a sword?
We don't like this guy.
No. There's some things you can like about him. There's a lot of things you don't have to like about him. That's all right. Our job as historians is to understand him, not necessarily.
What did you ask about mine, Mr. Zuber? What did you say?
Does yours have a sword?
Yes, he does have a sword.
All right. Reba, what's that around? Is that his cape around him?
Yes, let's go with that.
Okay. Shinar drew the planet and then crossed it out. Okay. Y'all are beautiful. This is wonderful. Yep. That's not bad right there. All right. Okay. There we go. We'll move on. Sorry. I just wanted to see how that worked and see what came of it.
You saw as a talentless hack at drawing.
Listen. This is I like this. Arushi drew a wonderful George Washington, and then underneath it wrote a clown. I love it.
Okay, who has the worst one?
It's probably yours, Luke. I'm just throwing that.
Yeah.
Let's see Luke's. I want to see Luke's.
Here.
All right.
Let's see the glory.
Okay, so when we look,
you can't see it.
When we look at the ideological basis of the revolution, of course, it comes from the Enlightenment and the Great Awakening, and I think those two things have to go together. When we look at why did this develop, is from both ideas. A lot of people focus on the Enlightenment because the Declaration of Independence was very much an Enlightenment document, but the Enlightenment was influencing the Great Awakening and this idea of individualism and creating more perfect individualism and equality. All right, and these things are going hand in hand, right? So John Locke and Thomas Hobbes are both pushing this idea that maybe, just maybe, the people should have more of a say. Now, Thomas Hobbes, of course, believes that the king should have quite a bit of power. John Locke thinks that the Parliament and the Republican Legislature needs to have more power. And John Locke's really going to push what he calls the social contract theory. And that means that a government is created by the people for the people. And if the government stops working for the people, it's the people's right to overthrow it. That's the contract. Like right now, if you don't think that our government is working for you, you have the right to get rid of it. Okay. Now that is not Mr. Zuber telling you to go out and revolt. That's going to be a personal decision on your part. But understand that according to the social contract theory, you have that. Okay.
Oh, none of us have power. You only have the power.
Then you have, of course, the ideas coming from the English Civil War. And I think this is something that a lot of people miss when we think about the American Revolution. We always think of it as this modern revolution. No, there was a Republican Revolution in England in the 1660s, headed up by a group called the Whigs. That's why the Whigs become a political party in the 1800s. And it's going to be, the Americans are going to be really reading a lot of them, John Locke being one of them, as far as what they're going for. And central to this debate and this ideological belief system that's developing here is a debate of should we establish more equality or more liberty. And I believe that that is a debate that we still have a lot, right? Which is more important, that everybody's equal or that everybody's free? And for some reason, in American society, we believe those two things are mutually exclusive. Like you have to give up some liberty to have equality, or you have to give up some equality to have liberty. And I think that that's something that we are still having a big discussion about in American society. All right. Now, the actual fighting of the war, I love it whenever I look at the curriculum framework. This is the whole American Revolution right here. This was the whole slide on, or the whole piece of the curriculum for it. So when we think about why did the United States win when it shouldn't have? The United States declares independence July 4th, 1776. And it is outgunned and outmanned and has no money. So why did it win? And there's only one real answer to that, and that's the French. But of course, we can't just give it to the French, so we have to give a couple of things. All right, so first off, the United States is fighting a defensive war. And when you fight a defensive war, you have a strategic advantage. All right. The British decide to use mercenaries more so than just British soldiers, and that's also going to give motivation, all right, as they send the Hessian mercenaries to the colonies to try to stop. All right. The British also misunderstand, like when you look at the colonies, there's no central population that you could take over and win. So they took over New York, who cares? All right, people just move out of New York. Or they took over Philadelphia, who cares? All right, there's a huge country that you'd have to control with not a centralized population. You also have foreign help, all right? And the foreign help comes from not only the French alliance, all right? The French, after the Battle of Saratoga, will ally with the United States and send money and ships and men. But you also have foreign advisors coming because they want to make a name for themselves. So Baron von Steuben, who had been released from the Prussian army for being gay, will come to the United States and become part of George Washington's training officers, and he'll help train the army at Valley Forge and help make them into a professional army. Then you have Marquis de Lafayette, who brings his French connections to help fight the war as well. And then, of course, we can't help but understand that George Washington, while not a strategic master, understands that he doesn't have to win. He just really can't lose. And he understands that, so he will run away a lot, and he will make sure that he never gets caught by the British. All right? And those things are going to be the main reasons why the Americans will be able to win this war against the British as we move into the 1780s. Okay? All right, our next one. Okay? And I pulled all of this from College Board because I think looking at what College Board has asked will give us an understanding of what they could ask coming up. So I've given a selection here, so let's read it really fast, and then very similar, we're going to work on answering this question up here. The coming of the American Revolution created new opportunities for women to participate in politics. Responding to men's appeals, women engaged in a variety of actions in support of the revolutionary cause, which led women to experience a greater sense of connection to and involvement with the polity. After the war, their political contributions were praised, celebrated, and remembered. Women were now seen as political beings who had the capacity to influence the course of war, politics, and history. So, you have to give me one event, development, or circumstance from 1765 to 1800 that is not mentioned here that would support her argument. I'll give you 3 minutes to type that in. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about this because I think this is important. It looks like a lot of you'll have some really good ideas here, and then there are several of you that are struggling with an idea. Okay, when you think about women during war, we always see women during war as increasing in opportunity in society, but you want to be specific to the American Revolution. So, if we remember the road to revolution, one of the big ways the colonists fought against all the taxes and what they considered oppression was through boycotts. All right. Well, if you boycott, what's one of the main goods that you get from Great Britain? It's textile cloth. And so one of the ways that women will help in the war effort is through what is known as homespun. All right. They would be what are called spinning bees, and they would make homespun cloth. Now you can make a connection to this because the British will have a corner on the textile market for much of the 19th century as well and into the 20th century. And other British colonial possessions will also use homespun cloth as a means of protesting and boycotting British imperialism. Can anybody give me an example of another
Yeah.
solution? Yeah? What'd you say?
Yeah, question mark.
I can't hear you. What'd you say? Say it louder.
India, question mark.
India, of course. Gandhi, right? Gandhi and the Indian Revolution in the 1940s. All right, they used homespun cloth again as this way of fighting against British oppression. All right, so that's one way. All right, several of you got that. That's excellent. All right, another big one. Right, remember we always talked about lowest hanging fruit. So the spinning bees and the homespun cloth is a good one. Another big way would be to go with the Republican motherhood and the ideals of the Republican motherhood. So when we talk about how the American Revolution created a change in the lives of American women. All right. Well, we have to go to the concept of the ideal Republican. Right. Most American leaders after the during and after the Revolution understood that for them the only way a republic would survive is if you grew Republicans and you made Republicans. And so this was where they looked towards women. They kind of deified women and said, women, your job as mothers will put you in the perfect position to uh, to influence the next generation of Republicans by teaching the kids about Republicanism. And so that's the idea of Republican motherhood, is that it was the job of mothers and women to go and who needs to mute? Someone mute. All right, that it was the job of women and mothers to go and teach not just their husbands but their kids about the concept of republicanism, and that's going to gain women access into politics. It's going to gain women access into education as they kind of pursue that role. All right. Other things on here that you can look. If you think about it, the American Revolution is not, massively revolutionary. Like, I think that you talked a lot about this in WAP. If you weren't in there, the American Revolution is not this like bloody upheaval of the entirety of society. You see incremental changes. In the North, you see that change in response to slavery with the creation of manumission societies. We'll talk about that at the end. With women, you see the gaining of some position and status in society. All right. You also see the American Revolution as being revolutionary in the way that it influences other later revolutions like France or Haiti or any of the Latin American revolutions, who will all draw inspiration from the Declaration of Independence and Common Sense by Thomas Paine. So those are going to be kind of the real impacts of the American Revolution when it comes to changing society. But will you see the proletariat, upheaval and overthrow of the bourgeoisie? No, not during the American Revolution. You don't see that. All right. When your leader is a massively wealthy slaveholder from Virginia in George Washington, you're just not going to see a whole lot of massive structural change in society that way. Okay. All right. So our next one, we have a prompt. I want you to write a complex thesis. Now, this is again going back to make sure you know your history. Evaluate the extent to which the Articles of Confederation provided an effective form of government. We've talked about this a few times. I think you even wrote this one, but I want to make sure that when you, as you're writing it, think about, all right, what does it mean to be an effective form of government? And was there something that it was effective at? Could that be our although statement? And then what would be a couple of good categories in which we see it being maybe not so effective? Oh, I just realized on my screen I can see all these little faces. Those are the ones that you answered. How you feel today? So a lot of you have little smiley faces. Some of you don't. I don't see any frowning faces, so that's good. Oh, there's one. I see a frowning face now. All right, looks like y'all kicked this one right in the teeth. I love this. A lot of your responses are really good. I'll pick one and share it, and then we'll talk about it. Okay. Um, okay. Although the Articles of Confederation prevented the government from slipping back into monarchy like Great Britain, the Articles were not really effective because the government could not enforce taxation, and it was very hard to pass new laws. Excellent. Let's see here. Although the Articles of Confederation provide mechanisms for expansion in states' rights, it was not an effective form of government because it failed to give national government a way to enforce laws and failed to create a dependable way to fund the government. So I think y'all hitting it around the head. All right, your although statement will be something like it kept the country together in a very critical period. That's what's called the critical period. It kept the country together, or it provided a way for new states to join. And that, when we talk about the successes of the Articles of Confederation, the Northwest Ordinance is going to be your biggest success coming out of the Articles of Confederation. But your biggest ones is hard to govern because you had to have a supermajority to pass any laws. And also you couldn't enforce taxation. It was hard to have an army. You couldn't defend yourself. There was a weak central government, and you'd have a lot of great evidence for that. Okay. Okay, Katie, your last one was fine, right? That's a big issue when you can't create a uniform currency. All right, that's a very big issue. So very good job on that. All right, so I'm not worried about it. If you get an Articles of Confederation, I feel like you have this. So we're going to go ahead and just move on from this one. All right. Because the Articles of Confederation did not work for the upper crust of society, those people who are trying to make money in speculation and financial markets, you're going to see a push to write and create a stronger national government. And this is going to come in the form of the Constitution. All right, and the Constitutional Convention will be held in 1787, and that's when they'll write the Constitution and present it to the states. 55 delegates will come in, all right? And what I want you to do is there are three big parts to the Constitution: separation of powers, checks and balances, and federalism. All right, there's also republicanism, but I hope you understand what that means. Republicanism is just a way of saying democracy, power from the people through representatives. All right, so how would you show me separation of powers, checks and balances, and federalism? Okay, Aiden, what are you drawing? Okay, so note to self: I need to give you a blank space to actually draw on this. I thought they would give you a blank space, but all right, Bethany, thanks for underlining those three. That's great. Okay, if y'all like to, so because I didn't give you a blank space, because I didn't give you a blank space, I'm going to go ahead and just stop the draw, and let's just talk about it. I'm just going to call on a couple people and see if we can figure it out. Leah Verghese, can you tell me what separation of powers means? You have to unmute yourself.
Yeah, so the separation of powers between the three new forms, branches of government: the legislative, judicial, and executive.
Okay, what does that mean? They separate their powers.
They have different responsibilities and they keep each other in check. Make sure that one branch doesn't have too much power.
Okay, good. Yeah, let's move on to checks and balances. Let's see here. Brooklyn, can you tell me about checks and balances? And give me some examples.
So checks and balances are how the branches make sure that one doesn't become too powerful. So, for example, the executive branch can veto laws that the legislative branch makes, yet that branch can still overturn the veto if necessary, and they can vote in judges to the Supreme Court and stuff.
Excellent, excellent. All right. Let's see here. Yeah. So when we think about checks and balances, it's always easier when you talk about the government to talk about the current one, just simply because you probably know a little bit more about what's happening in the current government than you do in, say, 1792. But we think about Donald Trump. Let's see, Donald Trump is about to issue an executive order. What would be a check on that power? What could the Congress do, or what could the courts do to stop him from issuing the executive order on immigration? Luke, what could they do?
Call it unconstitutional, the judicial branch.
What? Where'd Luke go? Aiden, why are you drawing an apple, pear, and a burrito?
Wait, I'm confused. What's going on?
Luke, I asked you a question. All right. How could the Supreme Court or the legislative branch stop Donald Trump from issuing his executive order on immigration?
They could, like, the judicial branch could prove it somehow unconstitutional.
All right. So the Supreme Court could declare it unconstitutional. Excellent. All right. What could the legislative branch do?
Oh.
It's the only thing they can do. Is pass a law.
Oh, that easy.
Yeah, just pass the law, man. All right. Yeah. Okay. So last one is federalism. Who am I going to pick on? Ava. What's federalism? Let's see if she's still listening. Ava. No, lost her. Let's see here. Reba, what's federalism?
Like power to the national government versus like state government.
Excellent. Yes, yeah. It's the sharing of power between the national government and the state governments. Could we give an example of things that the state government is in charge of and not the national government, technically?
School systems.
Excellent. Education. Okay. Anybody have a different example of what the states are in charge of that the national government's not in charge of?
Taxes?
What was that?
Property taxes?
Yeah. Okay. That's a shared power. All right. So that's not one that is That's not one that is either national or state. But yes, the state typically does property taxes, while the federal government will do income tax and some other fees. Okay. So good. So those are three of the basic concepts that are in the Constitution. That was created. It's a very short document and has been around. And how many amendments do we have in it?
27.
27. Thank you very much. All right, let's move on. All right. I think this is important because you always get it wrong. You should have two markers. All right. The red marker goes to the Declaration of Independence, and the blue marker goes to the Constitution. Hopefully, it'll switch here in a second. See how you do. Let's see if you can get it right.
May I sing a song in eighth grade, and it's been burned in my memory ever
Oh,
since.
please don't.
I wish that was true, but the number of people that I see that get this wrong, I wish that everybody knew this song that you speak of. All right.
Do you know what song I speak of?
Nick, you're going to sing it for me right now.
Let's not. They sing the preamble to the Constitution.
All right. How does the Constitution start?
Oh God, it's been
It's
literally more than
just
6 years.
On the screen.
No, but I was gonna close my eyes and actually sing it. But let's just start with the "We the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, and provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessing of liberty to ourselves and our posterity." There.
Yep. So the one on the left is the Constitution. It starts with "We the people." All right. The one on the right is the Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. All right. So be very careful with that. Now, the big question is, do you know the difference between the two? Why they're different? All right. I ask because
8th grade was a traumatic experience.
explain the difference in one sentence, one very short sentence. Can you explain the difference between the Declaration of Independence and the U.S. Constitution?
Declared independence, and the other one didn't.
Thank you, Andrew. Yes, please. Yes, please just all say the Declaration of Independence declared independence from the people they were wanting independence to be declared from.
No one shall see my bad spelling.
I can see it.
But yeah, did anyone else have to do that? Learn how to sing the preamble?
And Nick, I did.
I remember. Okay, anyone who was in, I can't remember her name. I think Asbury. That's her name. I don't remember.
All right. Looks like most of you getting it. The Declaration of Independence actually is not an official document at all. It simply was a statement of the intention of the United States to become an independent country. All right. It actually did not make the United States an independent country. All right. The war and the peace treaty in 1783 really did that. But it does state that intention for the purpose of gaining French support and Dutch support and Spanish support. The Constitution establishes the government of the United States. Okay, we've had two constitutions. The first one was the Articles of Confederation, and the second one is the Constitution of the United States. Okay, so the Constitution of the United States creates the government. The Declaration of Independence did not do anything. Not, I mean, as far as actual making something. All right, we have a couple more things to do. All right, we'll try to go as quickly as possible.
Where do we go to write the answers?
It should pop up. Are you on? Andrew, did you join the pair deck, or did you come in?
I think I just joined through WebEx.
No, I know that, but like at the very beginning, I had y'all join pair deck. Did you do that, or did you come in a little bit later?
I came in later.
Okay, I'm going to send out a link with this presentation in it, and you'll be able to go through it. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Our next thing is once you have the Constitution, you establish a new government. All right. The first two presidents, George Washington and John Adams, will be from what we call the Federalist side of the aisle. All right. And you see the creation of new political parties. Now here, I want you to list 5 facts you could use to argue this prompt. So what are 5 facts that relate to this prompt? In 1780s to 1790s, Thomas Jefferson and Alexander Hamilton expressed different visions for the economic future of the United States. Contrast their visions and analyze the extent to which each of their visions was reflected in the economic development from the period 1780 to 1840. Okay, so when we talk about stating facts, I just want always just want the key terms, okay, and how it would work out. But we know that the original intent of the founders was that there would not be political parties. They thought that political parties might be detrimental to a Republican-style government. And so you see that as a big issue early on within the first administration. George Washington was not a part of a party, but he tended to side with Alexander Hamilton on a lot of ideas. And Hamilton will become the founder of the first political party in the United States, and that is the Federalist Party. All right, and the Federalist Party will be opposed by Thomas Jefferson's Democratic Republicans, also known as Jeffersonian Republicans. You'll see it both ways. And it really kind of mimics, in a lot of ways, a thread throughout American history about how political parties view themselves. One is typically more pro-federal government, more pro-federal government power, and another one is more states' rights, okay, more state power. All right, and they ebb and flow and they move, and we see political parties die and go away, and we see new ones, form. But that tends to be the general split between the two for various reasons. All right, for various reasons. It is fascinating. Like today, Republicans tend to view themselves as the party of state power, and then, of course, during a pandemic, President Trump is arguing that he has the power over the states. So that's kind of fascinating, and that's not unusual. Pretty much every political party, no matter who they are, when they get into power, they want more power. All right. I feel like there's probably some philosophy about power out there that we could probably talk about. All right. So here, central to this is going to be manufacturing and trade versus agriculture. The agrarian nation versus the more industrialized nation. The Bank of the United States would be a good one. That kind of stuff. All right. The Democratic Republicans versus the Federalists. All right, and then eventually the Whigs. All right, and if you're going to 1840, you could also bring in the American system and the creation of a national market. Okay, these are all good ones that you could throw up. Okay, now we're running low on time, so I'm just going to hit the last couple really fast. All right, when we talk about culture, all right.
Mr. Zuber,
Yeah, go for it.
are you muted right now?
I am not. Can you not hear me? Can anybody hear me, or am I just talking to the wall? What's happening?
I can hear you.
Oh,
I can hear you.
Hear you.
all right.
Hear you.
Maybe it just cut out. WebEx is awesome. Is the inferior system to Zoom, so sometimes it cuts out. But I am also recording all this, and hopefully I'll be able to post it. All right. So out of the American Revolution, you have the creation of a national culture. All right. So what does that mean? National icons like Betsy Ross and the American flag, the 4th of July. You also have American artists like John Trumbull painting neoclassical style, American art, like this painting of the signing of down here. You also have the creation of neoclassical architecture with the development of Washington, D.C., Capitol Building, White House, and so forth. And then we have literary writers who are creating American novels like Washington Irving creates. Now, Zuber. All right, tell me what Washington Irving wrote. Rip Van Winkle, sorry, Rip Van Winkle. And if you know it, The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. Okay, Washington Irving. All right. And our last subject is slavery. The American Revolution is built off of the Declaration of Independence, which says that all men are created equal, and we understand that that is very subjective as far as who they consider all men are created equal. But you do see a growth in abolitionism after the Revolution with the creation of manumission societies. You also see the American Revolution influencing the South, because as the South grows and develops more slavery, they try to justify by saying it's a necessary evil. The founding generation, those early leaders of the United States, refused to really deal with the issue of slavery because they thought it would destroy the country. And then, of course, they justified themselves saying that it was a necessary evil that everybody would have to just deal with. Okay? All righty. Before I let you go, this is the end of it. Are there any questions that you have for me?
You said you were going to do a lesson over developing body paragraphs for DBQs on Friday, right?
Correct. Friday, it'll be probably at 3:30 or 3:45. I'll send out an invite.
All right, thank you.
So which periods can we talk about next week?
Next week we'll do period 7, which we'll jump all the way back up to 1890 to 1845.
period 7 going to be on the AP test?
Yes. Technically, it could be between period 3 and 7. So I don't know. I don't know which one they're going to pick. I wish they would give you all a choice. I don't like this idea of just one question to rule them all. But I don't have choice. I don't have a say in that. So
When's the DBQ thing? It's Friday, right?
Friday, yeah,
What time?
it'll be like 3:30. Okay.
Wait, what?
It will also be recorded and posted.
I was just thinking if my chemistry effort could do at the same time.
No, yeah. So next week, guys, just so you'll know, next week we are going to we are actually going to go to a schedule in which subjects have specific times. So, for example, social studies will be Tuesdays and Thursdays from 11 to 12:30. So, like, we'll do our live teach during that time, so it's not conflicting with other times. Does that make sense? So, only social studies will have Tuesdays, Thursdays from 11 to 12:30. So hopefully that'll stop some of these conflicts that you're having. All right. Any other questions?
I think we're good.
All right. If you think of anything as you go through, I'm going to give you this presentation. I'll also send out the pair deck so that you can go back through it if you want to. But always you can always on WebEx, ask for a meeting, or you can send me email or whatever else has happened. Okay. All righty.
Okay.
Y'all have a wonderful day, and I will see you on Friday, hopefully. What?
Hi, Mr. Zuber.
Bye.
What's going on Friday? What's going on Friday? Yeah, okay.
Bye, Mr. Zuber.
Bye.